After years of Viking invasions and raids, England was left battered and divided, but from this chaos emerged a new era, an era of kings and castles, of battles and betrayals. With the Norman invasion of 1066 led by William the Conqueror, England entered a new chapter. The Normans transformed the country, introducing feudalism, castles, and centralized rule. William's successors ruled with an iron grip, but by the time Henry I took the throne, the cracks in this power began to show. Though he was a strong king, Henry's reign ended in tragedy, as his only legitimate son died in a shipwreck. With no male heir, England faced a crisis that would plunge the kingdom into a bloody civil war known as the Anarchy. At the heart of this chaos was Stephen of Blois, the man who seized the throne but struggled to hold on to it. This is the story of Stephen of Blois, England's king during its most chaotic period. Stephen of Blois was born around 1096 in France into one of Europe's most powerful families. His father was the Count of Blois, and his mother Adela was the daughter of William the Conqueror. With such royal connections, Stephen's rise seemed inevitable. Stephen was sent to England as a young man and quickly became a favorite at the court of his uncle King Henry I. Henry trusted Stephen and rewarded him with lands and titles, making him one of the wealthiest nobles in England. As a favored companion, Stephen enjoyed wealth, influence, and royal favor, but this golden age in Henry's reign was about to come crashing down. In November 1120, Henry's only legitimate son and heir, William Adelin, boarded the White Ship to cross the English Channel. The vessel carried many nobles and heirs to powerful families, including Stephen, who was initially scheduled to sail with them. But tragedy struck when the White Ship hit submerged rocks and sank. Over 300 passengers drowned, including William Adelin. According to some accounts, Stephen had a stroke of luck. He missed the voyage either due to illness or a last-minute decision. For Henry, the loss was devastating. With his only male heir gone, the kingdom faced a succession crisis. Although Henry later named his daughter Matilda as his successor, doubts lingered among the nobles. The idea of a female ruler was unprecedented, and many, including Stephen, began to question whether Matilda could hold the throne. To secure the succession for his daughter Matilda and strengthen her claim, Henry demanded that his nobles swear an oath of loyalty, promising to recognize Matilda and her descendants as the rightful rulers of England and Normandy. Stephen of Blois was among the first to take this oath. As one of the most powerful nobles in the realm and a trusted nephew of the king, Stephen's pledge seemed sincere. But even as he swore loyalty to Matilda, doubts lingered. Many nobles were uneasy about the idea of a female monarch, and Stephen himself began to eye the throne. On December 1, 1135, Henry died after reportedly consuming a meal of lampreys, a type of fish he had been warned to avoid. With his death, England was left vulnerable. Matilda and her husband Geoffrey was in Normandy, far from the English court while her enemies began to mobilize. Stephen acted swiftly. Backed by his brother Henry of Blois, the influential Bishop of Winchester, Stephen raced to England to stake his claim. Despite his earlier oath to Matilda, Stephen argued that England needed a strong male ruler to avoid instability. With the support of the church and many nobles, he declared himself king. In a matter of weeks, Stephen was crowned at Westminster Abbey on December 22, 1135. Stephen's coronation marked the beginning of his reign, but it also set the stage for nearly 2 decades of civil war. Matilda refused to accept his claim, calling him a usurper who had broken his sacred oath. Her supporters rallied behind her, and the kingdom began to fracture. What followed was the Anarchy, a time of chaos, rebellion, and bloodshed that would test Stephen's rule and threaten the stability of England. Stephen's reign began with turmoil, not just within his kingdom, but also from threats beyond its borders. News of Henry's death reached David I of Scotland, who saw an opportunity to press his claims over northern England. Seizing the moment, David invaded northern England, capturing Carlisle, Newcastle, and several other key strongholds. At this time, northern England was a contested region. The Scottish kings had long laid claim to Cumberland, and David strengthened his position by marrying the daughter of Waltheof, the former Earl of Northumbria. Through this marriage, David also claimed rights to Northumbria, further complicating the situation. Faced with this invasion so soon after his coronation, Stephen moved quickly. He gathered an army and marched north. The two forces met at Durham, where negotiations began. Despite the threat of further conflict, Stephen reached an agreement with David. Under the terms of the treaty, David would return most of the lands he had taken, except for Carlisle, which remained under Scottish control. In return, Stephen confirmed the English holdings of David's son Henry, including the prestigious earldom of Huntingdon. This compromise temporarily secured peace in the north. With the northern border temporarily secured, Stephen returned south to solidify his position as king. At Easter in 1136, he held his first royal court at Westminster, a grand gathering of Anglo-Norman barons and church leaders. To strengthen his ties with the church, Stephen issued a new royal charter. He promised to honor the privileges of the clergy, reverse Henry's strict policies on the royal forests, and reform any abuses in the legal system. These concessions were designed to ease tensions and secure the loyalty of the powerful church, whose influence could make or break a king's rule. By 1138, Stephen's reign was under siege from multiple fronts. The fragile peace he had tried to build began to crumble as old alliances fractured and new enemies emerged. At the heart of this unrest was Robert, Earl of Gloucester, one of the most powerful Anglo-Norman barons and an illegitimate son of Henry I. Robert was no ordinary noble. As the half-brother of Empress Matilda, his loyalty had always been questioned. Despite being summoned to Stephen's court in 1136, Robert delayed his attendance, signaling early signs of discontent. By 1138, he finally made his move, renouncing his oath of fealty to Stephen and declaring his support for Matilda's claim to the throne. Robert's defiance triggered a wave of rebellions, particularly in Kent and the southwest of England. Castles were fortified, armies were raised, and England teetered on the brink of civil war. While Stephen struggled to contain rebellions in the south, danger loomed in the north. David I of Scotland invaded England for a second time, pushing into Yorkshire and capturing key strongholds. Declaring his support for his niece, Empress Matilda, David sought to strengthen her claim to the throne and undermine Stephen's authority. Stephen was now trapped between two crises, a rebellion in the south led by Robert of Gloucester and an invasion in the north led by David. Stephen responded with swift and decisive action. Prioritizing England over Normandy, he launched a series of military campaigns to stabilize his kingdom. While Stephen focused on the heart of England, he entrusted his wife Queen Matilda of Boulogne with a critical mission. She sailed to Kent with ships and resources from Boulogne, tasked with retaking the strategic port of Dover, which had fallen under the control of Robert of Gloucester's forces. Meanwhile, Stephen, with limited reinforcements, sent the northern lords to meet the Scots at the Battle of the Standard in August 1138. In a decisive victory, the Scots were driven back, halting their advance and safeguarding northern England for now. While this victory provided temporary relief, the rebellion in the south remained unresolved. The rebels had hoped Robert of Gloucester would send reinforcements, but he remained in Normandy throughout the year. Instead, Robert focused on persuading Empress Matilda to invade England herself. Confident in her claim, but cautious about the timing, Matilda hesitated, leaving Stephen with precious time to fortify his position. But Stephen's victories were only temporary. The kingdom remained fractured, and Matilda's supporters were gathering strength. With the threat of invasion looming, Stephen prepared for the next phase of the struggle, a war that would plunge England deeper into the anarchy. And so began one of the darkest chapters in English history, a time of chaos, betrayal, and bloodshed. This was the Anarchy, a civil war that tore the kingdom apart and tested the very foundations of royal power. Join us in the next chapter as we delve deeper into this brutal struggle for England's crown.